Welcome, everybody, to another edition of Coffee and Open Source, a place to meet some new friends, have some great conversations, and maybe learn something on the way. I'm your host, Isaac Levin. And if you're joining the conversations here, be sure to like, subscribe, follow wherever you're watching or listening. Also, if you or someone you know would like to come on and have a chat with me, find me on social media because I'm probably on the one that you're on because I'm on too many of them. And the best way to find out if I'm there is if you go to isaacrilevin.com, you will find all the places that I'm at. All right, with that out of the way, we're going to talk to somebody who has been paying attention to AI developer tools for a bit, dev tools for a bit, and I want to get their thoughts on everything. So my guest today is Tim Heuer. Tim, do you want to say hello? Introduce yourself.
Hello, everybody. As Isaac said, my name is Tim Heuer. I am currently employed at Microsoft. I've been at Microsoft for 21 years and exclusively in the developer kind of platform and tool space my entire time through pre-sales, evangelism, or advocacy, before it was called advocacy, and product development and cloud development. So absolutely love this space. Never really had any desire to look elsewhere. So that's kind of the current scope that I work on.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I would love to talk with you about is kind of the trends in developer tools over time, which I think that you've seen. And it's kind of fun to go back in the time machine to see like, oh, remember when we had to do stuff like this? But I'd love to get started when I talk to folks. What's your tech origin story? Like, when did you realize that technology was like the thing for you? Was it, you did the CDs in the mail thing like some people did? You got a computer when you were really young, or did you kind of get into it a little bit older?
So I will acknowledge that I lucked into it is really kind of the TLDR, I would say. So my father was always kind of like a programmer in the tech space. Like, he was a programmer, but also like a project manager in, tech space and stuff like that. So it was always like around me at home. In fact, like as a young kid, I remember when my dad, worked remotely his first time, and his bring home computer was this like giant terminal screen, right? Like that's what work from home meant, was like these dumb, I mean, the thing was like a freaking 13-inch TV basically. And we couldn't use the phone anymore because he had to dial in for things. So it was always around me, but I was never really interested in it. So I would say like my true tech origin story was really at university, where my job, I worked for Residence Life and with dorms, like dormitory living on campus. And my job was data entry. That's really what it started with. And it was triplicate forms. And I had to enter like incident reports. It was actually like the topic was like terrible. It was like domestic violence incident reports.
Oh, geez.
But and unfortunately there was too many of them. And so, we were just trying to classify these things and stuff. And this was Microsoft Access 1.0 timeframes. And I was like, okay, the thing that we have today sucks. And so I heard about this thing called Access, and it was a drag and drop environment that I could, create, quote unquote, a form that would just allow me to kind of map, what I'm seeing on the paper to this thing. And it had like reports, because that was a big thing, right? My boss was like, hey, can you tell me like, what are the incidents, for this month kind of thing? And so really that was my introduction to programming,
Sure.
I would say. And, for those who don't know, Access, it is like a lightweight, it's basically SQLite before SQLite existed, with some user interface on top of it, but powered by macros, right? VBA at the time. So that was like I would say my true origin story. And then I just kind of grew from there. I really had no interest in being in the tech world. In fact, at university, I don't have a tech degree. I don't have formal computer science background. My degree is criminal justice, and all I ever wanted to be was a police officer. But my journey through education just took me different places. I ended up wanting to get into educational leadership, and that was the path that I thought I was going on. And through an incident that happened at my first job, I was in a really bad car accident. It just kind of like shifted my career. And so as I was trying to find my way and work through like literally police recruit kind of interviews and stuff, I needed money, right? I took a temp job doing data entry. Again, it just brought me back to data entry. And if anyone has ever been in the US insurance side of the world, right, we have this period where we call open enrollment, where people fill out their forms. And during that time, there was no computers, there was no wide accessible internet. And so again, it was forms that people were filling out their insurance forms. And I was the person entering in for this thing. So I got a temp job, and the really catapult for me was the person at this company was looking to do something different.
Mm.
And so he approached me and he said, "Hey, are you interested in understanding what I do?" Because he's the one that built the system that I'm
Yeah.
doing the data entry in. And I said, "Yeah, absolutely." And so I kind of had this like apprentice relationship. And the app was Power Builder. So that was kind of my first, I'd say, like real programming. Sure, I did basic and all of those type of things, but like, I was working for a huge healthcare company for their open enrollment like systems, right? Like this
Yeah.
was like real, right? It wasn't just like some rando thing. And his name is Brian. And so Brian really took me under his wing and kind of taught me like, hey, this is programming. And this is, we were still on Windows 3.11. And I just really lucked into it. I just absolutely lucked into it. And I ended up really liking the creativity of things. And Power Builder at that time was a rough environment. And so this was like, see, this would have been like 95, 96. And, it's not, the tools aren't what we have today.
Sure.
And around that time frame was also Visual Basic 3, which really started this kind of like IDE
Sure.
tools and visual environment. And so that really, like when you can drag a button on a screen and you click it and you write something and then you hit run and then you really click the button and like things happen, you're like, holy, it was cool. Like
Yeah.
I actually didn't have to draw the button. The button was there for me. So that was really the spark around creativity. And I just rode that wave through that company. We did Windows 95 migrations, which, was like just another revolution for PC computing and app development. And then what really launched my career was I lucked into nearly everything. I caught the .com wave, and I just happened to be at the right place at the right time. I tell you a funny story about learning how to do web development, but I really just lucked into a lot of
Sure.
things. But yeah, creativity, like at each one of the step of the ways, it was something new. I always had somebody that was like really like Brian, this one guy was, I would say I was like true apprentice kind of mindset. But the other ones during the .com era and the company that I worked for, we had a group that just surrounded by a really great group of people, but also that were there to help me learn. And so I could learn from their expertise and things like that. And, and then I brought some new insights to them as well. So that's kind of the slightly longer version of,
Sure. No,
yeah.
there's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah.
The first thing I'll say is that um, I always tell this to people that say they've been very lucky. If you say like multiple steps in your career that you were lucky, like I got lucky in this situation, I don't think it's as much luck as you know how to get into a particular situation. And I think there's a bit more skill involved in luck, but anyway. Um,
Yeah.
Also the thing with access, like I think that everybody of a certain age was at a particular point in time where you saw a problem that Access solved immediately. It's so funny that that tool, I mean, obviously people talk to this day about Excel and PowerPoint and Word, but for whatever reason, kind of Access, as technology kind of evolved, kind of Access just kind of got replaced. And I still tell people like Access is the easiest way to build an app, even today. Like you can 5 minutes, you point it at a data source, and then you have forms, you have reports, and
Hmm.
there's like hardly any work. So,
Right.
I mean, it's funny now that we have like this whole industry area called like Power Platform or like Power
Right.
Apps, right? And it's like, oh, it's just like like access based in the web, which is I think pretty cool.
Yeah,
Um,
Access is the low code before low code was a term,
yes, oh for sure,
right?
oh for sure.
Yeah,
I mean, even Excel, right? Like you see people do
Excel,
create,
totally.
yeah. Like I think the productivity tools like Excel and Access specifically, like they introduced a ton of people into what was possible with technology, right? Like just the idea of like formulas. Like I don't know if you ever seen like the people that do like the Excel championships. Like they have it on
Oh
they
yeah,
have it like on ESPN randomly. I'm like, why is this on ESPN? Because that's hilarious. But like,
yeah,
they're given like these really bizarre tasks and like they just do it in like less than 10 minutes. Like you have to make
yeah,
a a form, but you has to be shaped like this and using this data set that's not collated at all. Anyway, that stuff's fascinating to me.
yeah. It's
Um,
nuts.
you did say something that I thought was kind of interesting, like the interest initially in criminal justice, and I'd imagine as a part of that, you took like a little bit of law classes too, right?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So, and as somebody who, my favorite class in college was like business law. I don't know why.
Same.
So,
Absolutely. Same.
and the reason why I ask this is because I've talked to enough people that they don't like, if say somebody has a typical computer science degree and they don't go through like a business school or anything like that. They kind of have like there's like I guess you could say there's a little bit of assumption based on like the people that went through business school. And I always tell people like, you know, everything is a problem looking to be solved. And I'd love to kind of get your thoughts as like coming from like that law and criminal justice sort of interest. Like what are some like ways that you go about solving problems in that space compared to like how you would solve problems in the tech space?
I think the art of problem solving, regardless of what you're trying to do, is not much different, right? I mean, you got to try to really understand like what is the actual problem. You can use whatever cliche you want, like peeling the onion. Like what is the actual problem versus what is the surface level thing that you're trying to do there. Um, who do you have to please is always a part of problem solving as
Yeah,
well. You can certainly be selfish, but and then a lot of like what biases are you bringing to the table in that problem solving as well, so that you can, number one, recognize them, but be open to like what are different alternatives and things like that too. So I think those are the things that like really just kind of come to mind for me, regardless of whether it's a tech problem or a parenting problem or those type of things. Yeah, I think just kind of breaking it down into what is the core, who am I actually working with, and what biases am I kind of bringing to the table of how I might approach this type of thing.
I agree. I agree a lot with that. I do like, and this is kind of a related question, but like, when did you realize that you actually like really like solving problems? Because I think that a lot of us that are in tech, like, we kind of are looking for problems to solve all the time, whether they're small little things like, oh, I have this thing, maybe I could automate it, or this thing, right? And we're so always looking for opportunities to like use technology as the solution to a problem. When did you realize that you actually enjoyed, like, the problem-solving aspect of things? Like, was it early on, kind of before you got introduced to computers? Like, did you enjoy school? Did you enjoy sort of the activity around problem solving in education? Or was it something like, "Oh, I see technology. I love technology, so let me look for opportunities to use technology."
Yeah, I think it's the latter for me. I did enjoy school. I consider myself I was a good student until university. Like, I got a lot of independence at university and realized like, oh, nobody's babysitting me anymore. But I enjoyed studying. Math came very simple to me. I liked math just because I always felt like there's a concrete answer.
Sure.
Like 2 plus 2 is going to equal something versus, if you had to write a paper, right, it could be subjective to like whoever's looking at it. So, but I didn't see any of that, any educational aspects as like problem solving or anything like that. So for me, it's the latter of, I think tech was really that point. And I spoke to it before about like the creativity
Yeah.
that I felt enabled. And so I saw that as like, oh, I can actually do things that make me personally productive. Like I have my friends will acknowledge this. Like I'm not handy with like tools or
Sure.
anything like that and
Yeah.
stuff. And so growing up, I didn't I wasn't a woodworker. I didn't build things. I would struggle to put things together. Like so that's just not my core skill.
Yeah.
But I think when I had tech and like the capabilities of especially in the late 90s of like the tools that were really unlocked that thing for the masses, I saw that as and again that those first wow moments that everyone has to have in
Yeah.
order to get that spark, I think really helped me want to say like, oh, how can I use this to problem solve things? And by the way, now I'm capable of doing it, right? It's not a hammer or woodworking or something like that that I just don't possess that creativity. It's a different level of creativity, and there is some math to it, right? There is some determinism of like, oh, in order for the button to do X, it has to follow this path,
Yeah.
right? And so for me, I would say that's where I really started to enjoy the problem solving space because I think I had more direct applicability to it. and then that just kind of catapults, right? Like, in your profession or your personal life. For me, it was more about the profession. Like I didn't really infuse tech into my personal life. I think it was a little bit harder, right? I think probably that problem solving for like the tech and like my personal interests and stuff was really sparked in the mobile era,
Yeah,
versus other times. Like I was really absorbed in my professional work rather than like I didn't come home and like build websites
sure.
or I actually didn't have like a home even things, and then I'm not a gamer either. So, but yeah, I mean, like when the boss at work is like, hey, how are we doing on this particular product, and what can we do to target more sales or whatever. So most of the stuff I did was sales and marketing systems, and so there was a lot of like analysis there, and it's like, oh, that's an interesting problem. Like, let me see if I can help that. And sometimes problem solving is just answering data questions
Yeah.
too. But I felt really empowered to have that creativity and unlocked by the capabilities that technology allowed me to, accelerate that problem solving.
Yeah, I can relate a ton to the I'm not very good with woodworking. Like my garage is full of power tools, and when people come over, they're like, "Oh, what are you working on?" I'm like, These are all my wife's stuff. Like my wife does this. Like I probably don't even know how to turn that thing on. Like yeah, so, like my wife is happy if she gets like a new drill for Christmas. Like
Yeah, nice.
that's kind of what my wife's into.
Yeah.
Like I totally subscribe to like the idea of like solving problems, but I do think that what's interesting, and I don't know at what point in time you made this shift, but like there's a difference between solving problems for businesses and solving problems for I I guess the best way to phrase it is like the more meta side of tech, where it's like you're solving problems for people that are solving problems for businesses, if that makes any sense. Like meta programming or meta tool sort of stuff. Like, when did you realize that you enjoyed, like, building tools for other people to build things?
Yeah, that is an excellent question. I'm trying to think, like, because I think usually the thing that I get most enjoyment out of are always for selfish reasons, right? Like, what from me.
Sure.
And so, if you look at any of my repos on GitHub or anything like that, they probably will seem very uninteresting to everybody else, but they're very extremely interesting to me,
Yeah,
right? Like, so, um, but the what you're asking is like, how do I translate that creativity for other people? So for most of my Microsoft career in the developer space, I worked a lot in UI frameworks. And so like Windows Forms, WPF, like all the XAML flavors, um, and Silverlight, those type of things. And so I think I really enjoyed being able to, and in fact, this is how I describe my job today to non-tech people, like, my parents. They say, "What exactly do you do?" And I say, "I build the stuff that lets people build the stuff you use."
sure. Yeah,
Right. And so I think that's fun, right? And I think it was the UI framework era where you're like, oh, someone is really trying to build this, business application with, the data grid that sorts and groups and stuff, and and they're struggling. It's like, what can we do to like unlock that person's creativity? And now we can just give them this widget in the form of whether it's, an actual control surface or an API, or some tool that gives them insight to what their problems are having, like deepers and things. I think that is that's empowering, and it's exciting to basically pass on that spark to other people that I enjoyed. And UI frameworks for me unlock that because I could also visually see people using the things that and by the way, I'm gonna say my a lot. It's definitely a team environment, right?
sure.
Like I'm just a cog in the wheel. But that environment to like really enable others and then see those moments of creativity in others and saying like we helped that,
Sure.
and
What's
that's
fun
super powerful.
what's funny, as somebody that's worked at Amazon, like, Amazon very much they don't say explicitly, like, take, credit for things, but they definitely, like, stress the idea of ownership. So, like, the idea it's like, "Oh, you use the word I a lot," which I think is funny coming you're saying like, "Oh, it's a team effort, it's a team effort." I just kind of thought, "Oh, that's a bit not antithesis, but it's a bit different as to how that's phrased depending on what tech company you work for." Um,
Yeah.
I do I do say too, like, you got prolific in tech, Like, you found interest in tech, like, I think in my opinion, like, one of the great times that we could really get into it, like, the explosion of the web, then, like, right after the iPhone comes out and the explosion of having to build things on mobile. Like, I just maybe just go back a little bit and tell me, since you've lived through, like, working in those times of, like, .com and then the introduction of, sort of mobile development, what are some of the similarities that you saw between those 2 times? Right, obviously, like, the breakneck speed at which technology was evolving, but, like, were there trends that if you were to look back and say, "Oh, yeah, like, this thing definitely happened 3 years before, 4 years before."
Yeah, I mean, there's always trends, right? And I think, in the span I've been able to in my tech career time frame, I've been able to see trends even come back, right? And
Sure.
I think they come back in different forms, but they're definitely back. Like, as an example, um, I people are gonna whatever flame away. Uh, I equate like the plugin era, so Flash, Silverlight, those
Okay.
type of things, very similar to WASM.
Yeah.
And the problems that and people be like, no, WASM's like a standard and it's built into the browser. I'm like, yeah, okay, so fine, it's pre-installed, like whatever. But like a lot of the problem spaces and stuff are still the same. So that's an example of one that's a trend where I see like the problems that are trying to be solved, and actually sometimes the technical solutions for them are very similar. Other ones I've seen less like technically like one to one, but more like e-commerce is probably one of those like fast-paced eras that
Yeah.
you're referring to. I remember that time frame very well, and the the explosion of .com for what people saw on the outside is very different than what tech people saw working on it. uh, the main project that I was working on was enabling brick and mortars to just sell stuff online. We had customers coming to us all the time and saying, we have a store. How do we sell? Like, we hear people are selling online,
Yeah.
and they're not like we and they're not startups, right? If you
Yeah.
want to use kind of today's terms, right? Like people that are digital natives or startups and stuff. Those weren't the retailers of the past. These were like, JC Penney's and Dillard's and these sporting goods stores that had brick and mortars, and they're like, hey, help us sell stuff online. We're like, well, what are your computer systems? They're like, yeah, mainframes.
Yeah.
And so, we had to like unlock their mainframe to a website. So that pace of everyone wanting to move to .com and selling stuff online is very similar to some of the, not, I would say not at the same velocity of like AI today, but I remember that being breakneck speed.
Yeah.
Like everyone was there, and things were changing because we were all trying to figure it out. We're like, oh, I mean, we would jam orders and credit card information in query strings all day long.
Oh, sure.
Like, because nobody realized like, oh, that's probably not a good idea, right? Like, and so those were the type of things that were evolving all the time of like, oh yeah, security is important. So who's jumping on that? And these companies would sprout up. And but yeah, I would say like that's an example of something that was like super breakneck speed at the time. That was really, really exciting to work on, and understanding like how do you innovate, how do you differentiate, and tons of different problems to solve as well. A lot of late nights and stuff like that, and exciting times to be a software developer at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about this the other day. I think, over the last 20, 25 years, I feel like we're just stacking like abstractions on top of abstractions, right? So like, you know, maybe just going back to like the .com era. Like, okay, the introduction of the web. Okay, well now with devices, you need to be able to access the web not just from computers, but from the handheld devices on your phone. And then you start talking about, okay, well, all these websites look like garbage. Let's create JavaScript frameworks to make them look a bit better. You just keep on stacking, stacking, stacking. And then the hyperscalers come in where it's like, okay, now you actually need to care about thousands of people accessing your resources at once. And now we're at this point now where the inflection point has completely switched over to how can you automate as much as possible, but still have some form of human in the loop for um, basically process, right? To make sure that we're not shipping code that shouldn't go where it shouldn't, and we're doing things in a really effective way. And even now we're kind of going to like, oh, let's just let the AIs review themselves in a secular fashion, it will be good. I guess my question for you, like thinking about that kind of historically, is at what point do you think the abstraction becomes a bit too hard to follow? Because I think if you've been in tech for like the last 20 years, like More than likely, you build a website. More than likely, you've had to, if you've worked at a modern company, you probably had to use some form of cloud resources. But like the AI paradigm is completely different to how technology typically works. So, like, at what level do you think we've started to kind of deviate away from like a traditional technologist where, we're writing code all day, we're not reusing things. I guess I'm rambling a bit, but I guess my point is
Mhm.
like when do we start to separate ourselves from like us writing code 8 hours a day to us using existing technology to get our job done faster?
Yeah, I mean, we're definitely in that era now, right? And I
Yeah,
think like, the way you phrased it is interesting to me. So I think like the deep understanding of like AI today and like properly and functionally what an LLM is and does is a wider chasm of abstraction than previous ones. And I'm just speaking for me,
sure.
right? Like, because you can be like, oh, well, here's this framework and here's this concept called dependency injection, and now like you could, all the layers that you were just talking about, you can still kind of like easily see the previous one that the veneer
Yeah,
is layering on top of, right? I think this current era, for most, I would posit for most, is more of a black box than those other ones
sure.
because you can see less of it, right? It's more of like, I'm going to go jam some inputs into this machine and it's just going to give me a bunch of outputs. And I actually can't see like what it's doing. I
Yeah.
have to trust that, these reasonings and those type of things are happening. So I think the current era to me, that distance between those abstraction layers feels further in understanding depending on where you sit in the stack, right? Like, so if I consider myself an app developer, it feels further away than I consider myself like a framework developer who needs, to be closer to the metal or things like that. For me too, I think cloud infrastructure was also one of those as well. When you started had to worry about like the hyperscale type stuff that you mentioned and like how it all works together and disparate systems and things like that. That was also felt like a learning bump of a wider abstraction from the thing, the code that I write and what I have to worry about in those areas. Um, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very fascinating to me, and this is just Isaac's old man yelling at cloud hot take, but it's like it seems like with every new technology that we adopt, we create a whole new set of problems. Like we have problems, and then we have tools that are enabled to solve those problems, but in the process of enabling those tools, we create more problems, right?
Mhm.
So I was thinking about this the other day, where it's if the phone didn't exist, like the idea that like, oh, you need like responsive design, like wouldn't have ever existed, right? Like more than likely, or not at the scale where it does, where you needed like 16 different view modes for every device that exists to make your website look good. And that was a problem that was created from the for devices and for cloud. Like the idea that you need to care about scale. Like, okay, we need to scale it, but then you introduce all sorts of things because you don't own the hardware anymore. So, like, there's going to be things like DNS, or heaven forbid, one of the hyperscalers goes down. And now I think with this AI trend, and I'd love to get your thoughts on this, is like we're introducing a ton of problems that I think people know, but also like there's real no solution for. Like, and this is top of mind because we were talking about this before we got started. It's like, you know, you can basically now point all of your information at like an AI agent or set of AI agents at all of your information, and it will just kind of run things for you. And the amount of
Mhm.
problems that exist from that. So I guess my question is like, do we have to be okay with creating problems that don't exist in order to solve previous problems?
Great.
Well,
We have to be
and if
okay.
I didn't phrase that very well, like
Yeah, I'm
I
trying
can
to
try
parse
again.
that.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
like I guess my point is that because of how technology exists, we end up creating more problems over the course of iterating and innovating with tech, right? So my question is that something that we should just continue to just accept over time? Or should we be looking to implement solutions to problems without generating more problems? I know I didn't do a good
Yeah, I
job that
see.
time either.
No, I see what you're going for. Is like
Yeah.
I actually don't think that you can innovate and improve things without introducing something
Sure.
net new, right? So whether they're problems or just different, opportunities, I think that's just the natural course of consequential choices, right?
Sure.
So yeah, I think we have to be real comfortable with like every change that we make is a pivot and, creates new edges, new compliance issues, new technical issues, new limits that we don't know about yet. And, especially in tech, like any one person who or collective that starts designing something, even if you think you have the perfect design, you have no idea how users are actually going to use it and abuse it and stuff, right? And
Yeah.
so I'm not sure that, so that's why I think you have to be comfortable with it,
Yeah.
because what you're saying is if I can't be comfortable with it, I have to anticipate everything, and I just that's not the human nature
Yeah.
yet. So because we design for purpose, and when somebody uses beyond that purpose, then it's like, oh, we didn't think of that, or we need to put these in place, or whatever the problem you're trying to solve is. So yeah, I absolutely think you have to be comfortable that innovation will create more challenges.
Yeah, and I think the reason why I wanted to ask is because, especially in this world, I feel like we don't have a ton of visibility into all of the problems that currently exist, right? I think that we do, at some level, understand, oh, there's a lot of security concerns here. There's economies of scale things. There's sustainability things, but we really don't know if those things are going to go away on their own or if they're not going to go away on their own, right?
Very true.
Yeah, and I think at least talking to you, who is working in this stuff day by day, like, I would just like, candidly, like, what has the 18 months been like for people that are trying to build developer tools and trying to, in one hand, make sure that we're catering experiences for the today developer, but also looking forward to building solutions and things for the future developer?
Yeah, these are the polarities that my team is faced with every day, right? Like we have a base of customers that we want to, serve and keep productive, right? That is the job that we are in developer tools, is to really make developers productive, whether that's the frameworks they use or the tools they use. And what we're seeing is a massive shift in what those tools and productivity is defined by. And so our, duality of purpose is, maintaining the ship and how to innovate for the next wave, which by the way, the next wave is coming faster than
Yes.
any previous other wave. That is our real challenge of like, the time to make decisions and the time to innovate has just shrunk massively. And the scope of people innovating in this space is incredible. You know, I don't even know what the time frame is, but I'll just call it a year when we were talking about what AI to developers was, code completion, right? Where
Yeah.
you start writing code and it's like, oh, I think let me complete that method for you,
Sure.
right? And you hit tab and you go, oh my gosh, and those were like the smaller wow moments and stuff. And I will tell you, like even we see in our own usage patterns, like it used to be like we call those completions, right? Completions usage was like the thing that we were optimizing for. It's like, oh my gosh, the quality and how do we do this and how can we fine tune the model? What are the inputs and what algorithm are we chasing, the yada 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 and stuff. And we're really trying to, and then suddenly like agents came to be,
Yeah.
and you're like, you see the usage of completions just like crater
Yeah.
because their usefulness is less than just talking to an agent, right?
Yeah.
I don't actually even have to start writing that method. I just say I need a method
Yeah.
that does this, or and now it's not even the method, the unit that we're operating on is I need an app,
Yeah.
right? And so that scale of each one of these productivity things has rapidly increased on a time frame that I've never seen any other previous like problem or solution be solved in that time frame. That makes sense,
No,
right?
it definitely does, and this is a constant struggle that I have because I'm somewhat of a contrarian. Um, so, like, I'll see something and I'll be like, "Okay, does Isaac go and spend a couple of hours learning this thing? Or does Isaac wait a couple of weeks and this thing might not exist anymore?" Like, I was talking to somebody a few weeks ago. He went on vacation. A friend of mine went on vacation for 2 weeks. He went to, like, I can't remember, he went to Southeast Asia or somebody like that. And he didn't have cell phone access and whatever. He came back and he was like, "Isaac, I don't know what's going on." He's like, when I left, MCP was like everybody was doing MCPs, and now like MCPs are dead. Like Anthropic is saying that MCPs are dead, or I'm paraphrasing. But I guess my point is, how do you keep up? How do you keep up? Not how do you keep up? How do you keep up effectively? Because with all this stuff, you have to kick tires on it. You can't just watch a video on YouTube, right? You actually have to like run the thing. You have to pull down the model, or you have to figure out some way to build against it to really understand what it's doing, right? And
Yeah.
when you add that
Yeah.
black box perspective, where you're just getting announcements, we had this model out, we have this model out, we have this thing out, we have this tool out. How do you keep up?
Yeah. So, we talk about this pace, and like in the office, a lot of people say, wow, January was a long year, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
that literally is the pace that we're in. So that, like, go on vacation for 2 weeks, you come back and the world has changed. Like that's happening, and 2 weeks is going to be too long for the next time.
yeah,
So here's what I would say is that I think if you consider yourself an engineer, a software developer, like someone who actually is in that craft, not a manager or those type of things, right? But I think this does apply, it's just at different levels. I think you have to make time for learning. If you consider yourself in the space and want to innovate and, don't want to be a dinosaur or whatever cliche you want to use, number one, you have to make that time for learning. So for me, that's every Friday. I dedicate time every Friday to just play. I use the stuff that I work on that helps me learn, and it helps me build a better product on top of that, number one. The second thing is you talked about those abstraction layers before. It is okay to learn all the things that in 2 weeks might be thrown away, because guess what? The thing that it got thrown away for is probably just a different abstraction layer, right? So
yeah,
the example that you're talking about MCPs and stuff, I assume you're talking about a lot of the dialogue around like, hey, MCPs were the hotness, and now we're talking about skills, right?
yeah,
Guess what? They're all just layers of the
yeah,
same thing, right? Especially in the AI space, like it's context in. That's what everything is. And these are just different ways and shapes of putting that context in. And all the tool vendors and agents are just finding ways to optimize for their own business models,
yeah.
which are literal models and tokens and stuff, or their own experiences. And how do you automatically light things up? And so then you're like, well, dang, we really put a bet on MCPs, but we can't do this thing in this way. What if we did X? And it turns out X is now that new unit of innovation, right? But that doesn't mean that everything that you learned in MCPs is now invalid and just like totally thrown away,
Yeah.
right? It's just a different, like you said, it's just a different abstraction layer. So I think you have to make, especially in this pace, like if you want to live it, you have to make that time to learn, and I think it's valuable to look at that. Now, I think there are some things that are like on the supreme edges, um, that then I think they'll just be dependent upon like what you are in that space. So like for me, like a lot of the Claudebot stuff and things like that, for me and my day job and things are a little bit more on the edges
Sure.
than the other like concepts and stuff
Yeah.
for
No,
me.
and I agree. I think the thing that I struggle with is, I totally agree with your premise of like you got to spend multiple hours a week learning or just keeping up. Let's just not even say learning, just keeping up. My struggle is that it's very, very hard for me to find like reliable content because it is moving so fast. So like
Mm-hmm.
you'll go and watch some guy's YouTube video and you're like, I don't know if this is good, or you'll go and look at a blog, and it just seems to me like it is moving so fast that content creators and people that are responsible for educating are struggling to keep up with the demand of creating content. So you're seeing like people try to create AI based content around this stuff. And I guess and the reason why I bring this up is somebody like you who is like as part of your career, you've created tons of content, right?
Yeah.
Like what is the level, and I have my own belief of this, like what is the level of knowledge you need to know on something to create content about it?
Oof. I think there's an authenticity angle to that, right? Because I think the real answer to your question is, especially in today's world, right? Like probably not a ton
Yeah.
to create content. Now, to create good content that's useful and helpful to somebody is like a next level on that dial, right? And I think that's where it comes with the authenticity, where you're not just regurgitating a concept, but you can put it in practical use
Yeah.
and kind of demonstrate that. So I think that to me, that's like the two things. Like you can create like, hello world type style content without knowing a lot, right? Some Google searches or even using AI today to kind of explain some concepts to you. You could probably create some pretty good intro level content. And then if you actually want to like really make that useful and for others to, put in use, I think it's that pragmatism and practicality that you layer on top of it of like, yeah, let me show you like the real world synopsis of this. And here's the power use of, whatever that concept is. And I think you can't do that without living it. I don't think
Yeah.
you can just educate that out without like having a lived experience. You can't, in my opinion, I just don't think you can create an outline and just execute the outline. I think you have to have a lived experience that you can call BS on, that
Sure.
table of contents outline and just be like, yeah, yeah, you can do this, but this isn't why it is. I look at a lot of some of the good content creators in the .NET space, and I see that they pulled the wool over my eyes, or I see that authenticity that when I see them speak and things like that, that I'm like, yeah, yeah, they've used it.
Yeah.
They didn't just read the doc. They didn't just listen to some, flame war or some troll or about doing something. I can tell that they've used it.
Yeah.
And I think that's the, the pivot of content.
Yeah, I had a conversation with a speaker. It was probably 4 or 5 years ago now, because I was struggling with, how was the level of expertise you need to have to be, in your eyes, like a good speaker at a conference, right? Like, and I'd
Hmm.
spoken at conferences for years, and I always had like the I really don't know what I'm doing, whatever. And they said something to me that I kind of got offended, but also fascinated by. And they said, all you need to do is know more than half of the people in the room. And when I heard that, I immediately thought, well, why half? Why not just all? And I think that's what's, I'd love to get your thoughts as somebody that's done a lot of speaking and things like that, because when you create content or when you speak in front of, like, you have there's an implication that you are an expert, right? There's an implication that people can ask you a question and you'll know the answer. So with this sort of stuff, when let's just say 1% of the people that are looking into this stuff are educated, less than 1% probably in the grand scheme of things. How do you actually build like that level of authenticity you're talking about? Because we're all learning that, like this Claudebot thing came out like a week and a half ago. There's no
Right.
experts. The only expert is the guy who wrote it, right? Like, so how do you become an expert in that? Is it just putting time in to learn it? Um is it kind of using the abstraction thing, like, oh, this kind of worked like this in this other abstraction, so I'm going to kind of, correlate those two things? Like, how do you kind of connect those sort of dots?
Yeah, I think for me, there's always like a scratch the surface, right? Like, what is this thing?
Yeah.
So let me just find that surface level thing. And then again, I get back to like, for me, I just have to use it.
Yeah.
I have to get my hands on so that I'm not just reading the docs and, it's, you know, walk the walk and talk the talk, right? Like I think that's the way that I think that's the best way that you inevitably can not necessarily be an expert, but can get to the point of asking the right questions to gain, even the more knowledge. And the
Yeah.
result of just that doing that, this is all stating the obvious, by the way. The result of just using it is how do you use it, right? You're not. And I would say like when you approach something, don't just hello world it. Like fine, you can do
Yeah.
that. That's your first 5-minute exercise. But really, like we get back to problem solving, right? What is the selfish thing that you want to accomplish? It's
Sure.
okay to be selfish and just be like, I freaking have this mobile app that I want to do. Okay,
Yeah.
then I'm going to apply that to do this thing. And because now you've learned something, but you've also applied it more pragmatically, that the person you're telling it to, it's not just a storytelling. You had a job to be done that you can demonstrate that you completed and you learned how to complete it using whatever technique tool, blah, blah, blah,
Yeah.
those kind of things. And you just can't replicate that authenticity or that knowledge without having the lived experience of using it.
I 100% subscribe to the idea that the only way that you're going to learn something is if you have a problem that needs to be solved. Like, I've made this joke
Yep.
1,000 times. Like, I've learned Go like 20 times, right? The number change, like, because I've never really had a problem that I need to solve with Go. So I go through
Right.
like, the first couple of exercises and I'm like, okay, I could do something. And then like a couple of weeks go by and I'm like, oh, like maybe I'll try, and then I'll try Go for this thing. And I just can't because I have to keep on going back to the docs and all these sort of things. And then I fall back into the tools that I'm more familiar with. And I think, you know, one of the things I find interesting about what we're doing now in tech is that, we talked about this a little before we got started, is like the gatekeeping that's happened in tech over time, right? Like there was a point in time where, okay, you need like a very, very powerful machine to be able to like build your apps and things like that. So people had either desktops or they had laptops that weighed like 15 pounds. And then the cloud came and we had to talk about, okay, what are the, budgeting and resource allocation, things like that to be able to not spend a ton of money, um, you know, in our with our cloud bills. And then we've kind of gone back and forth in this cycle thing like, oh, you need a heavy machine, you don't need a heavy machine. And now we're kind of back in this world where you don't really need a heavy machine. You can if you want, but you don't really need one. But there's a potential barrier from a cost perspective because like you said, if you want to try out all these different tools, most of them don't give you free trials. And if they give you free trials, they're very, very limited, right? Just because of the way these things work, right? So the question that I have for you is like, is that going to be the thing that slows down a lot of the adoption of these sort of tools? Is just, you know, typical developer at home can't justify spending a couple $100 a month on different LLM providers or AI services in their monthly subscriptions.
Um, yeah, you're pointing out a very good thing, and I shared with you earlier. Like I kind of I hadn't written a blog in a while, and I did mention this that I feel very privileged in the space that I'm in to not be throttled, quite literally, right? So yeah, I recognize it's different for every person. I would say to the person who's kicking tires and stuff, and you mentioned the word like at home and personal and those type of things. I do not think you need to have a lot to get started. I think, like, as I observe, and even in our own business models and the stuff that I work on, the shape of quote unquote the free is extremely permissive.
Sure.
So I really truly think that the barrier to entry is lower than it ever has been for someone to try out even the most advanced technology. And if someone wants to push back on me in that and say, yeah, but I can't do, and I hit my limits like, within 2 hours and stuff, then I would say you're probably not doing that small personal project. Sounds like, you're doing
Sure.
something different, right?
Sure.
So I think the barrier for entry has actually never been lower. And I'm not saying that to mean that it's not there.
Yeah.
But I just think, it's a lot lower. The tools that we produce have extremely permissive licenses, before you have to pay, right? And honestly, like if you have to pay, that's probably a good problem
Sure.
that you've hit, right? You have a great idea or things, I'll just give you one anecdote. I have a friend that is not a technologist anymore. He used to work at Microsoft, but he retired several years ago, and he's in the bike industry, and he's a bike shop owner.
Mm.
And we were just talking about AI, and he was like, "Hey, do you think they have a retail point of sale system off the shelf?" And he's like, "We want to integrate like text messaging from the browser, and so we hired this software developer." And I was like, I think you can just use Copilot, man.
Yeah.
Like, and we
Sure.
within 15 minutes we had a Chrome extension that worked,
Yeah.
and he was blown away. And so now he's completely started a new part of his business because of AI advancements. And he was just telling me, he was like, I think I'm paying for a pro subscription, but I haven't gotten throttled of anything yet. And he's like, I am going 8 hours a day
Yeah.
just talking with this agent, and it's building this like intense 3D model, yada yada. I won't give away what he's working on, but like it's really cool, and it's hardware interfacing, and he's not a developer,
Yeah.
and he has not felt that gate
Yeah.
yet.
Well, I think the model optimizations is crazy. I think that that is an exercise in and of itself that people should learn. Is like, how far can I get with like, the 1x models or the models that aren't as expensive versus going to like the super expensive models? Because, if we're paying attention to, what everybody says, like, okay, you want to be on the latest models, you want to be on, whatever Anthropic or OpenAI or Google, you want to be on that latest thing. Like they announced it today, you're on that one today. Well, that one that came out today is 10 times more expensive than the one thing that came
Hmm.
out 6 months ago. Is it really any better? Yes and no, right? There's some trade-offs. So, but like being able to optimize like your token usage is a skill set in and of its own. Where I think that, especially as a lot of companies that have a ton of developers using these tools and they start looking at bills, it's going to be like a required exercise, right? It's like, okay,
Yeah.
how are you, like, whether it's limiting access to models or, everybody needs to only be using these certain kinds of models or whatever it is, right? So I think that might be one of the ways that we kind of facilitate like the sustainability piece of it, because I worry too. Like, for instance, me, like I built something. um, I had the idea before the stuff got crazy. I built a lot of it, and then I was looking at it, and I was like, I could probably just vibe code like all of this. So like I just vibe coded it from there, and I basically built like a video clipping tool. So like you like for this podcast, I can I can get this video from YouTube or locally, and I could use AI to generate interesting pieces of the video. So I can clip them out and post them to TikTok or whatever, right? And it's
Right.
all done in the tool. And I mean, I didn't get throttled once. And I mean, it's not a huge app, but it's not small. Like I got a lot of stuff
Right.
going on in it. And one thing that I think that you said that was really interesting is like the like opening up new opportunities thing. Like the Chrome extension thing or like the Stream Deck plugin or like all the different things that you can build, but you don't really know how to build them. You might know JavaScript, but you don't know how to build a Chrome extension. You don't know like the manifest file and all that stuff.
Hmm.
It does it for you. So all you can do
Hmm.
is focus on the thing that like you actually know. And if you don't know it, you can just toggle from agent to ask, and then it'll maybe might give you some information. You know, I think one.
But the thing,
Yeah, go
if
ahead.
I could just
Yeah, of
quickly
course.
interrupt you, the thing that you do know is what you want to accomplish.
Sure. Yeah, yeah,
And that's the greatest power right now in these type of interactions is like, I don't know the thing, the manifest, whatever. I know that I want to get a mobile app in the iOS store
yeah.
and pass app review. And
Bad
I could
example.
describe that.
Bad example though, because that's hard.
The reason why I brought that up
Yeah,
is that was one of my recent learning things was
yeah,
I had, again, selfish reasons. I had this idea. I wanted an app for my iPhone. I don't care if anyone ever uses it, but I wanted it. And I thought to myself, like, actually, I wanted to go through the store because I had let my cert expire
sure.
for other reasons and stuff. And the hardest part of this entire process was the app review and store certification, store certs
Yeah,
problem and navigating that. And I got version 1 of this app through the store, and I don't have a Mac.
yeah.
I used all agents, and GitHub Actions was my. I probably abused my GitHub Actions as my like inner loop
Your
build
testing ground.
environments.
Yeah,
Yeah, because because I use TestFlight to get me the app distribution and stuff. But it was like that felt so incredibly powerful.
yeah,
And all I had to know was what I wanted to accomplish. And again, like you said, the stumbling blocks were actually process, not the not development, honestly. It was scary fun. Scary
yeah. Well,
fun.
I think that's kind of goes into like the last thing that I wanted to talk about, and it's probably top of mind for you, like since you're in product management. But I feel like there's been this pendulum swift for a long time. It's like engineering versus product and where the responsibilities lie. And now I think about there has never been a time that a project manager, a product manager has been more needed as a part of the process. Because back to the conversation we had about problems, right? And problem solving. Like product managers are the most equipped to identify the problem and solve it. Not to saying the engineers can't, but their focus should be on other things like using tools to enable technology. So like what do you think about like the whole world that we're in where it's like, okay, you can generate specifications using spec kit, and then you can do these things and you can add these things. What do you think, the product engineering or the product management side, how is that going to be affected in the long term by AI?
I mean, it's affected immediately already, right? Like if you think of like traditional product management, where you think about like what is the research, product market fit, user study, that cycle had what I would call a traditional flow and usually a timeline around it, right? And we had the luxury of the market that would either dictate or not dictate the timeline. So you could be like, oh, let's do a bunch of user studies this month or this sprint, right? And we'll use those and okay, we validated the problem. Let's come up with a concept that we can actually put in front of the next people. So we heard a lot of these things. We validate, yes, we have a problem here. Now let's, have a prototype. Let's take that prototype. Let's test it. We call that concept value testing. We'll do that this sprint, and like, okay, and then we tweak things. And you have like a quarter or 2 quarters of work that you kind of get a product out.
That's
So I
slow.
think
That's slow now.
it's unacceptable. It's
Yeah.
just you are dead if that is your timeline
Yeah.
now. Just absolutely. And so what we've seen in product management is like, how do you compress all of these things without really giving up um, certain aspects of the stages along the way. Some things you have to give up. So on our team, we constantly talk about, you have to be comfortable with rapid experimentation and undoing what you just shipped, which is for a company like Microsoft and in the space that I work in, we historically have not been comfortable doing, right? We ship
Sure.
things and we never take them out. And so we've had to try to get more comfortable with like that concept value stage is like just in the open and in the wide area now. I'm not saying we're good at it. I'm just saying like that's the mentality that we've had to try to adopt to. And every one of those stages has shrunk. For product managers, we also are like, you have to get rapid acceleration in order to like kind of those middle stages of concept value tests and stuff like that. And so we're trying to find ways of how do we accelerate our own things in order to contribute to engineering or contribute to research and things like that, to be able to say like, I have an idea, right? With the tools that are available to everybody now, the PMs have never been more equipped to translate that idea into a working prototype,
Yeah.
right? And I think like showing, I'm a big believer that I think showing is way better than reading. They both have their purposes, but a spec can only do so much inspiration versus like, I had this idea, let me show you.
Yeah.
And that's how some of ideas get so much more advanced. And so as a PM, you have to also use all of these tools at your disposal to accelerate every one of those stages. And then again, be comfortable with the risk of just like putting stuff out there that's not fully formed as an experiment, and either pulling it back out or quickly adopting or adopting quicker. You look at the Copilot CLI team over this past couple of weeks, right? They've shipped probably on some orders sometimes like 3 times a day,
Yeah.
to the public. I'm not saying just like shipped in the repo.
Yeah.
Like, if you sat in a 12-hour period with your Copilot CLI and just kept saying Copilot update, you'd probably have gotten like at least 2 versions in a day,
Yeah.
kind of thing. And so for PMs, it's no different. Like, we have to be at that same pace. So yeah, everything has changed in our world, and time is now the luxury we just absolutely don't have. And
Yeah.
so how do we use all of the technology to advance our own thinkings? And part of that is that you as a PM also have to be now a member of technical staff, is like the term jour I think a lot of people are using.
Sure.
But I think you have to be more technical than you ever have been, to accelerate all of those stages of product management. And I think the big thing for us in PM space too is understanding the insights. And so you want to be able to rationalize like, okay, we did the thing, like, what is success? How do we measure success and things like that? And thinking about, uh, fast ways to get that feedback to be able to, act on those decisions. So yeah, the same wave is heavily affecting the PM space as it is engineers.
Yeah, I mean, I think I could have an hour-long conversation just how, like, just what your job looks like, right? Like,
Yeah.
you wake up one day and it's a different problem to solve. We talked about this, where it's like every day there's a new problem, right? And it's about deciding what problem you want to tackle today, sort of stuff. Um, but I looked at the time and it's like, we got to end this. Tim, this has been great. It was really good to catch up with you and learn a bit about your backstory and, what excites you so much about building things for developers enough to do it for 21 years. Like, have you ever thought, like, 21 years, you're like, I've been doing this for 21 years, and you're just like, oh man, like, has that hit you yet? Like that number?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Last year was my 20-year celebration. Yeah. And I think that was a good moment, and my kids have grown up, they're through college and stuff, and they've, just seeing the stuff that's adjacent in my life, and how that has aged and stuff like that too. Like, yeah, I would say last year was a huge wake up moment for me of like, wow, I've done some things and I've seen some things, and like, I'm still here,
Yeah.
kind of thing. And there's a new wave. Like, yeah, for sure. I definitely feel like the old guy for sure.
No, well, I mean, I think You're only old if you decide to not learn anymore. That's something that someone told me a long time ago, and I've kind of stuck with that. It's like as long as you're learning, like you're really not old. Like numbers, the number is a number. Um, so this has been great, and I want everybody, if you're not paying attention to what Tim and the folks over in DevTools at Microsoft are doing, there's 1,000 places you can kind of follow them. You can follow Tim like at Tim Heuer, TimHeuer, different social media platforms. You're blogging again, which I think is pretty cool. But it's definitely it's good to see like people blogging about the stuff that are so close to it. Before we sign off, do you have any parting words?
Not really. I mean, I think like as we've been talking, I think, the parting word is I would say, yeah, I think learn. I think is an exciting thing. Make the time to learn, and learning is fun. Like be selfish, and that's what makes it fun.
Being selfish is it's so funny that you say it like that because obviously selfish has a negative connotation, but it's like,
Yeah,
you know, build things for yourself and if other people enjoy it too, that's only a good thing, right?
absolutely.
Um this has been great, Tim. Thank you so much for your time. And thank you for the folks who are
Yeah,
tuning
thank you.
into this live and the folks that are listening in the future. So my name is Isaac Levin. If you're liking these sort of episodes, be sure to like, subscribe, and share with your friends. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. For my friend Tim, take care.